Welcome, deer hunters, managers, and enthusiasts. This is Deer University, the podcast of the Mississippi State University Deer Lab. My name is Bronson Strickland.
And I'm Steve Damaris. Bronson and I are professors of wildlife management and co-directors of the MSU Deer Lab. Together, we've researched deer across the United States for more than 40 years. In our podcasts, we explain the why and how of deer management based on science. Whether it's research we've conducted or explaining research done elsewhere, we'll offer you a college course in the science of deer management.
But don't let Steve scare you. This isn't going to be a review of calculus or chemistry. Instead, we take results of research, reduce it to what's important, and explain how you can apply research to management. So join us for this episode of Deer University. Hey everybody, this is Bronson. Just a quick note before this next podcast plays. I wanted to let you know this was recorded earlier this year, back in August in Michigan, and the topic was about some learning to hunt programs as well as care for venison. And I don't know why, it just didn't seem like back in August that was the appropriate time to talk about these programs. So I saved it, and now I'm uploading it here for you to listen to, and you can learn about these wonderful programs to introduce people into hunting, as well as some really expert ways to care for, serve, and cook your venison. One last little note, you may have to contend with some sound quality issues. We were recording outside that day, so you may hear some horn honking from a car or something like that, but I apologize for that. But all in all, I've done my best to adjust the sound, and I think it turned out just fine. Thanks a bunch. Welcome back to the next episode of Deer University. And today I am on the campus of Michigan State University, MSU North, as we call it. And it's a lot cooler up here, by the way. I left absolute misery in Mississippi. It was 90-something degrees and about 200% humidity. And so this feels fantastic. And I'm here today with other colleagues, and we're here for a meeting of the Boone and Crockett Club. But while I'm here, I wanted to speak to Jordan and Johanna about a really cool project regarding the other aspect of deer management, and that is the consumption of deer. And Jordan and Johanna are going to tell us a little bit about a project first called Gourmet Gone Wild, and then Learn to Hunt. And it is really an interesting way, number one, to learn about how to introduce people to hunting, and also how to care for wild game and how to make it taste really, really good. So, Jordan, why don't we start with you? Sure. Let's start a little bit, give people a little bit of background, where you came from, kind of what your story is, and tell us how Gourmet Gone Wild got started.
Thanks, Bronson, and welcome to Michigan. Yes, I think it's only about 75 degrees, and this is how we like our summers up here.
Me too.
So again, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to tell you and your audience about Gourmet Gone Wild and Learn to Hunt. A little bit about myself. I am a faculty member here at Michigan State in the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife, but my position is outreach, and so I work a lot with the public. My position is really cool in that it's funded partially by the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, partially by Michigan State University Extension, and I have operating funding coming from the Boone and Crockett Club. So I always say I have the best of all worlds. I have the best job. So one of the programs that I work on, as you said, is connecting people, maybe people who didn't grow up hunting or grow up in the outdoors, but connecting them to hunting and conservation. And I do that through Gourmet Gone Wild. And before I tell you more about Gourmet Gone Wild, I want to tell you a little bit about myself.
Yeah, please do.
I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and I did not grow up hunting and fishing. I grew up spending time in the outdoors and enjoying the outdoors, but nobody in my family hunted or fished. It wasn't until I went to University of Missouri for my undergrad that I majored in fisheries and wildlife and started to learn more about the habitat management, the species management, about wildlife. And so had many fellow students who were hunters and learned about some of the reasons why they hunted. And it wasn't until I came up here to Michigan State University for grad research, was actually radio collaring deer down in southern Michigan and tracking their movements and survival, that I became friends with some other fisheries and wildlife grad students and went to a barbecue. And at the barbecue, they were grilling backstrap. And mind you, I had been a vegetarian for 10 years previous and had not eaten any red meat. And it wasn't until I could smell the wonderful grilled meat on the grill, that backstrap, it was marinated.
Smoke. Oh yeah.
That I had an opportunity to sample wild game for the first time. And pretty much I can say I was hooked as soon as I had that first bite. I had never had anything that had tasted quite like that, and it wasn't just the venison that I was eating, it was the story behind the harvest of that particular deer, how they processed it, and basically the deer was only harvested just a week before. And so learning more about it, and that meant a lot to me, being able to know where my food came from. And that's how I got interested in communicating with others the benefits and reasons why people could and should hunt.
That's an amazing story. And when I was an undergraduate at the University of Georgia, I knew so many people that had a very similar background. And still to this day, there's a lot of people that will not eat red meat, unless it's hunter harvested. So they're totally into the fair chase aspect of it. If you're a locavore,
yes.
If you're into organic, there's nothing more organic than a deer or a duck.
That's
so
exactly
I
right.
completely appreciate that.
Well, and even fast forward to now, I've been hunting for the last 10 or 15 years, and I have small children now, and it's important for me to be able to explain to them and let them know where their food comes from, and they get to see the animals that we harvest, and they get to help process them. They get to help make hamburger and sausage with us at home, and that's really important to me. And I'm finding more and more that people are interested in taking more responsibility for the food that they're putting in their bodies.
Absolutely. We are the same way at my household. They typically don't make it the entire way through the processing part.
True.
But I at least have them out there while I'm gutting the deer, and we go through, and I go through some basic anatomy, what the rumen is, and there's the heart and the lungs, and we talk about some of the basic muscles. So, but they know where venison comes from. So when we are having backstrap or spaghetti or
Right.
whatever, they readily identify with where that meat came from.
And I think that's so important. And is for my family, but I think as we get more and more disconnected from nature or from what we eat, I think that's important to have.
Yeah. So how did that transition into Gourmet Gone Wild?
Yes, good question. So I do have to give a shout out to Erin McDonough. She is the woman who developed Gourmet Gone Wild with me. It was actually the very first time we had ever met. We were sitting at a table, we had mutual friends, and we were talking about the decline in the number of people that are hunting and fishing, and the decline in just the number of people that have a passion for conservation in the outdoors. And we got to talking. We're both kind of foodies. We enjoy trying new foods or food prepared in a unique way, and said, gosh, is there an opportunity to kind of pair together wild game beyond just your normal potluck of chili? Can we take it up a level where people who identify as foodies or interested in trying unique foods, that we can take wild game to that next level? Can we pair it with some local beer and wine? Michigan is blessed with having a lot of wonderful craft beer and wine. And can we really meet people on their own terms? Talk to them about the benefits of hunting and fishing and conservation while serving them professionally prepared wild fish and game that has been harvested within Michigan, and then pair it with some of our local beer and wine. It seems like a win-win.
What can be better than that?
It would be an event that I would want to attend.
Yeah.
And that's really what we did. The next step was really trying to identify an audience. The audience that we selected was young professionals here in Michigan. There are many young professional groups that meet on a monthly or quarterly basis. And we as hunters do a really great job talking to each other about how awesome hunting is. We don't do a very good job talking to non-hunters about how awesome hunting and conservation is. So this was an opportunity to go to young professional events. They were already having these events across the state, and it was going to them on their terms. They were already meeting, and so we were partnering with them. We were bringing in a professional chef who was preparing all of the wild game dishes that we were serving, and he was also doing a cooking demonstration. So not only were they getting to sample these 4 or 5 different amazing dishes, they were also learning how to prepare the dishes at home. So we would send people home with a recipe card. We would give a little program and talk to them about why hunting and fishing and conservation are important to them, why it was relevant to them. Even though you may not hunt and fish, well, these are some of the reasons why people fish and why people hunt and why conservation is important. You know, it's local, it's healthy, and it's sustainably managed. A lot of people here in Michigan don't realize that, you know, they say I pay my tax dollars and that goes to support conservation, when in fact such a small, you know, pennies on the dollar actually goes to support conservation. Most of it's through license dollars and through excise tax on ammunition and whatnot. So they don't realize that. They also don't understand, people that are not hunters, that wildlife are managed by the state agency, so species don't go extinct, and so they're managed on a sustainable way. A variety of aspects that people just don't know unless you tell them.
So this is an evening program typically. So is part of the program like a workshop or seminar? Do you open it up with a program where you're telling them all this information, and then it transitions into a cooking demonstration and culminating in the meal?
Yes, more or less though, we like to hook them first with the food. We like to give them the food. If they choose to have a sample of some local beer or wine, and then we explain to them what they're eating. Dishes like rib roulettes, where we cut the inside of the meat between the ribs, wrap it in bacon, bourbon brown sugar, Worcestershire, a variety of the ingredients that have this fall apart dish that people rave about. We do a Great Lakes chowder. We do pheasant dishes, rabbit dishes, just a variety of different entrees for folks to sample. And then after they've had some food in their belly, we then talk about the program and say, you know, this amazing food is one of the many reasons hunters hunt. And it's been very well received across the state. We kicked off the Gourmet Gone Wild program here in Michigan in 2013, and we typically have between 6 to 10 events a year. So we've been going on strong for many years, and we've had several states contact us wanting to start a Gourmet Gone Wild program in their own state. And we are fortunate that we have a lot of phenomenal partners. Gourmet Gone Wild is a partnership program between Michigan State University, the Boone and Crockett Club, Michigan United Conservation Clubs, and the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. And we've been fortunate to get funding from the Cabela's Outdoor Fund most recently for this project, for this program.
Do you go to an existing, what did you call it, young professionals?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the organization you always work with? Could it be other organizations as well?
Yes, most definitely. Initially, it was young professional organizations. Many of our larger cities have young professional organizations affiliated with that city, and so we would go to those cities and host an event in partnership with the young professional. They were already meeting. It was their regular monthly event. We just brought the food and the program. Since then, we've expanded. We've been doing Gourmet Gone Wild programs with families. We've been partnering with our Michigan Department of Natural Resources and hosting events in more urban areas down by Detroit. We've also had some events at farmers markets. So we've had cooking demonstrations at farmers markets to talk about Gourmet Gone Wild. Again, trying to reach out to the non-hunting audience to talk about the benefits of hunting and conservation in a unique way, really using food as that hook.
Oh yeah.
Talk to them through their bellies.
Food is always the best hook. So how did this go to Johanna, and how did we get into?
Yes.
I guess outside looking in, I'm thinking you're telling people about all the benefits of hunting and of conservation, and they're tasting all this delicious food, but then they're probably saying, I don't know how to get involved in hunting. Am I going down the right path?
You are exactly. And really the purpose of Gourmet Gone Wild initially was just to increase social support for hunting and fishing and conservation. Again, trying to focus on that non-hunter. But what we were finding after our events, we would have people coming up to us saying, this is awesome, this food was amazing, similar to what I did after having backstrap for the first time. And said, where can I learn how to hunt? I don't know anyone that hunts. None of my family or friends hunt. And for the first couple years, I said, that's a really good question. I don't really have a good answer for you, because most of our programs here in Michigan are youth focused. They're just teaching kids how to hunt. There wasn't that component to teach adults how to hunt. And so I also had many people who said, I have backyard chickens, I have my own garden. This is right in line with kind of the next step I want to take. Where can I learn?
Yeah.
And so that's where I was fortunate to meet Johanna Dart, and she is our Learn to Hunt program coordinator, and she is the person who's in charge of developing our curriculum for our Learn to Hunt program, which is basically an opportunity for all these people from Gourmet Gone Wild and a variety of other places we're recruiting to participate in our Learn to Hunt. But basically an adult-focused curriculum with that food concepts kind of sprinkled throughout the curriculum, but again focused on adults, where we talk about hunting ethics and still focus on firearm safety and get people comfortable with getting into the woods to harvest their own wild game in the future.
So would it be similar to a hunter safety course in terms of the firearm safety part
Yes.
of it, but you're providing further education on why you hunt?
Yes.
Well, Johanna, tell us about how you got started. Also give us a little bit of background, please. Where you're from, how you got started, and where you're going from here.
Hi everyone, my name is Johanna Dart. As mentioned, I am the program manager for the Learn to Hunt programs here in Michigan. And I did not grow up hunting at all. I have been hunting since 2015, so I have 2 whole years under my belt so far. But I was actually born in South Korea, put up for adoption at 6 months, and a wonderful lady, a single mother living in Michigan, adopted me into a great little family with a sister. I grew up spending a lot of time outside with everyone, but we never hunted. It wasn't something my mother was ever exposed to. It wasn't something my sister ever showed an interest in. And as a result, I didn't know anything about it. I had a lot of pretty negative stereotypes about hunters from the media. I think every kid my age has seen Bambi. Has some pretty negative perceptions of hunting. So it came to be that I went all the way into my mid-20s before I was ever exposed to the conservation world at all. I had the good fortune to be chosen as part of the Glass and Scholars program here at Michigan State University. It matches interns with a natural resource organization, and they take a class for credit throughout the course of the summer. I was matched with Jordan here for the Boone and Crockett Club extension at Michigan State. I ended up spending my summer researching what an adult class would look like. So someone like me who grew up with no hunting experience, doesn't really know which end of the firearm to point where, is maybe really afraid of firearms because everything that they've seen about them is pretty negative. What's a safety? How do they work? Am I going to shoot my foot off? There's a lot of really big barriers for adult hunters, and that was something that I was uniquely positioned to work on because it was something I was going through myself in my development as a hunter. And so all of these little things evolved into our pilot Learn to Hunt Deer class. We hosted it in 2015. In the fall, here at various partners, we used the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. We had some conservation officers come out and speak to our students. We basically tried to take a crash course for them, everything that they would ever need to learn about deer, but at an adult content level. And then we would take them out in the field, show them, what are you looking for when you're looking for deer? Where do they live? What does their poop look like? Why does their poop look like that? Where are good places for them to live and why? So a big focus on kind of trying to explain to them how you find them instead of just using it as a guided hunt to show them how to be successful later after the program.
So this started as your brainchild, well, you and Jordan, and it grew into this.
It did.
That is fantastic. So how did you go about researching something like that? I mean, how did you go about developing this curriculum? And I'm guessing because you were going through it for the first time, maybe some of the questions that you had you thought would translate very well to other people, and that's how you built the curriculum?
Yeah, definitely. It was a lot of outreach to other states. I spent the first couple weeks of my internship emailing every single state coordinator under the sun in every state I could think of, asking them, do you have any programming for adults? If you do, what does it look like? what measurement tools do you use? I asked around for pre and post program surveys, for agendas, for flyers to see how they advertised it and who they advertised to. I then tried to take what I learned and push it into an agenda with the content that I thought would be the most important for students. My first agenda draft and my last agenda draft were drastically different, as I learned that most people do not hunt deer at the mid-afternoon portion of the day. So that didn't work. I had to move that around. It was actually a learning process for me as I tried to create a program for other people like me. I was fortunate enough to be invited down to Kentucky, actually, by Jamie Cook. He runs the Hunter's Legacy program, which matches university students to like-minded and aged peers, and they go out on a mentored hunt. So I got my first doe in October of 2015 in this program, and I remember having this moment in my head where everything sort of clicked, and I remember thinking, this is why we spent all this time on crossbows and on accuracy, because it looks so much different when you're sitting out there and you get really excited and your hands are shaking. That's why Jamie made me run around in a circle and take a couple shots. This all makes sense. Little pieces sort of fall into place after that first hunt that I was able to carry over into our agenda. I try and make sure, for example, I ended up taking my first doe laying on my belly in the rain. So I now at the range, it was very intense. I was not prepared. But
you were prepared. You were successful.
Yeah, absolutely. It turned out very well, didn't it?
I felt like Rambo a little bit. But
it's really hard to explain buck fever and that physiological response.
It is.
Doe fever.
It is.
But
I remember
you got to live it. You got to go through it.
Very shaky.
Yeah.
There's a moment where everything sort of stops for you. But if you have that extra training with your mentor to know that you are confident taking that shot, and I was. I had never killed or tried to harvest anything ever in my life that wasn't a mushroom. And I remember having this moment where this giant doe walked across. She probably wasn't giant in real life. She just seemed giant to me because I was laying on my belly. But she walked across and she stopped and she looked at me. And I had this moment where everything went through my head, all the training I had done, and I was able to make a choice. I knew that I could get a good shot. I was confident in my marksmanship, and I was ready. And that's something that I try and stress too in my programs, is that not everyone is ready when I was ready. It's okay if you see a doe that's in range and is a great shot, but you just aren't ready yet. That happens a couple times, actually. That's happened in my programs, and that's fine. It's more about getting out into the wild, learning the things that you want to learn about, feeling confident to take the shot or not take the shot. And we work really hard with our mentors to try and make sure that everyone is comfortable with their current skill set.
And knowing why you're there makes a big difference. Taking the shot opportunity, the food that it's going to provide, the meat that it's going to provide, that's exactly right. If you don't mind, a little bit about your program, the class. Is it structured for every day for a week or for a few hours? Is it you come once a week over a couple months? How does that work?
We've played around with a couple different formats in the past, and I can confidently say that we are thinking that a weekend format is the best for our age group that we're targeting, just because they seem to have the least amount of free time. So our pilot year, we offered the class for a few hours on Friday, a full day on Saturday, and then a full day on Sunday. The second year, we tried experimenting around with making it 1 day a week for 3 weeks. That was really difficult for people to make it to the locations that we were asking them to come to give up that many weekends in a row. So for our third year, we're going to switch back and try a weekend format. So we'll have them for a few hours on a Friday, a full Saturday, and then an optional hunt again on Sunday.
So typically, Johanna, this will end in a hunt or an optional hunt?
Yes, we have them for some educational content. On Friday, we make sure that they're confident with their crossbows, that they understand how to cock them, how to discharge them if they don't end up taking a shot, that their marksmanship is where we want it to be. The next Saturday, we have them for a lot of hands-on content, so we walk them through scouting, what you're looking for when you're scouting, their basic biology, all the little components that someone who's from a completely non-hunting, non-deer side would be interested in knowing. We go through marksmanship and range time with them. Again, we really want them to feel like this crossbow that they've never seen before is a part of them, and to have that experience like I had, if they do have a shot opportunity, that they are 100% ready. Mm-hmm. And then it ends in a mentored hunt experience.
And I guess now they're also part of a network. After they've been through the class, they probably meet other people, and hopefully it will continue.
Yeah.
Become part of their lifestyle.
One of the main motivations we've seen for participation in our program is to meet other people interested in hunting. A lot of students end up finding commonalities with each other that they didn't realize. I didn't realize I would have a great time with this German kid that has dreadlocks, but he's really pretty cool. I think I'll meet him again next week.
Yeah.
We have a lot of unusual friendships form.
The demographics as well of the Learn to Hunt program is we not only get kind of the food, we've recruited a lot of people from Gourmet Gone Wild, people who've been to Gourmet Gone Wild. We have people who are now retired and have said, I hunted once or twice when I was a kid. I haven't done it in a really long time. I now have time. Now that I'm retired, I want to learn again. We have a variety of people that are becoming part of the Learn to Hunt program.
We see a great deal of fisheries and wildlife students actually, who have, for instance, I had a student in my program using license sale tracking, but he had never bought a license. So he decided, well, that's a gap in my education. I suppose I should learn something about this. And now he's been to most of our different programs, and I'm hoping to see him again soon for an advanced program that we're offering this year. I see a lot of students motivated by food. We get a fair number of people. One example I can think of is a student from Germany, actually, who did not eat meat for a very long time, moved over to the United States to further his education, and was very distrustful of the meat industry in general. And he decided that if he was going to eat protein, it was going to be something that he could be accountable for and something he could understand in his fishery and wildlife sense of knowledge, where it came from and what it was. So we've seen him at every program that we've offered so far.
That's great. That's great. I've got a real practical question. It's kind of selfish too, because I want to know what a chef would say. Do y'all ever give any advice, or does the chef ever give any advice about meat preparation from harvest to table, in terms of what are the best practices in terms of cooling the tissue down, things like that? So coming from, MSU South, so latitudinally we're way far south, and deer season, it's really warm. So when archery season begins, it could be 90 degrees, typically not 90 degrees, but certainly 80. And you have got to get the carcass, out of the woods. You've got to get it dressed and cooled down really, really quickly. And I often wonder, people that try venison for the first time, was it mishandled? And that actually affects, a lot of the times I don't even go during archery season on the really hot days. It's because I don't want to I have the issue of wanting to get the tissue cooled down so quick. So that has just been my experience. What is a chef? What might they say about that?
So I'll speak from the Gourmet Gone Wild perspective. Yes, the chef does cover that. The chef talks about temperatures for hanging deer, how long to hang the deer. He talks about the fat and the effect that the fat can have. He talks about the reason why some meat may be gamey is because of the way it's processed, and immediately cooling the meat down and how you process it and how you remove the skin and remove the fat all affects the taste. And so my chef Dan Nelson, who's the Gourmet Gone Wild chef, talks about it more practical but also theoretical terms, because our Gourmet Gone Wild events are year round and we don't necessarily have a carcass there. He's talking more theoretically as he's preparing the dishes. But I'll let Johanna tell you, at Learn to Hunt, we actually bring in a butcher. Okay. And the butcher goes through the processing with the students.
So for our Learn to Hunt deer classes, we do have a really excellent local butcher come out and help us out, and he takes them from a field dressing all the way through the processing, and it's hands-on. It's great for the participants because they can ask a lot of questions that they've had about game meat, and he does an excellent job of equating pieces of the deer to pieces of a cut that they would see in the supermarket. So he makes it really accessible for all of them, in that a shoulder on a deer is really tough because this is a muscle that they're using when they're running through the fields. This is different than a shoulder on a cow because this cow has been living on a farm eating this, that, and this, whereas a deer is running around and gathering it for themselves. So he explains to them then how that translates over into what they're cooking. So if you're eating a steak, you'd want that to come from a body part that isn't being used as heavily versus people who choose to take parts of the neck. That's something you're going to want to ground down and put into your burger. He talks to them about safe temperatures. He talks to them about storage. We'll go through a freezer wrapping preparation with it. He'll help them ground down pieces of dough or of deer that they've carved off themselves and learned what they're cutting and where it's going. He'll let them use his burger machine, his industrial burger grinder. It's really cool, but they get to package up whatever they've cut at the end and take it home with them. He walks them through freezer paper versus vacuum bags. He does a really great job of making it accessible.
Bronson, can I do a quick plug for...
Plug away.
Gourmet Gone Wild was able to partner with the Boone and Crockett Club on a cookbook, a wild game cookbook called Wild Gourmet. If anybody's interested, Google Wild Gourmet or get on the Boone and Crockett website. But Gourmet Gone Wild had a part in that our Gourmet Gone Wild chef authored the second half of the book, which is basically a step-by-step, how do you process game meat? And it's one of the most comprehensive books out there, I think, on game processing. And then the front half of the book has amazing recipes from renowned chefs across the country. So it's won a couple of awards. It's a really great book, and there's even a few pages about the Gourmet Gone Wild program within the cookbook.
And I have the book.
Good for you.
I got it for Christmas, not this past Christmas, but the one before. And that was one thing I really loved. And I was going to ask both of you, what is something when you're talking to these cooks and chefs, something that you didn't know, something that you learned? And the one thing that really stuck with me from that book was the fat. Is that with deer, that's usually where your off flavors are coming from, the fat, and that is just the opposite when we're working with beef and pork. We want fat. Fat tastes good. Fat keeps the meat moist and all that. So that is one thing I'm very, very careful about now, is removing all the fat. What do they grind? What type of fat do they use to grind their venison with? Do they use beef fat, pork fat?
Pork fat, a lot.
Pork fat usually,
yeah.
Okay.
Just depending. I mean, personally, from a personal perspective, we don't put a lot of additional fat when we grind up burger. Our deer up here are pretty fatty. We don't. We'll use some of the deer fat, which doesn't, in our family, we must process it away. There isn't an off taste. We don't buy ground meat. We use ground venison for anything we would use ground beef for. And we only add additional fat when we're making sausage, either breakfast sausage or some sort of summer sausage. Other than that, we really don't.
Okay.
So we have pretty big hardy deer up here.
Yeah, you do. I do both. And a lot of it's what I can get from a butcher.
Sure.
Sometimes I have a buddy who has a buddy that works in a restaurant, and they have access to all the spare fat on the big ribeye roast. So when I came to that, I ground my burger with the ribeye fat. Okay, so some people are probably interested. I know someone's going to be interested in, can we start a program like this in our state or in our community? What advice would you have for them, and where could they maybe go to get some resources on how to start something like this in their hometown?
We'd love for folks, if they're interested, to get online and look at gourmetgonewild.org. That's where we have information about the Gourmet Gone Wild program. There's a way to connect the Gourmet Gone Wild program manager. Her name is Ashley. She would be more than happy to send you information about the program. We've kind of put together a toolkit for other states and other organizations that are interested in trying out Gourmet Gone Wild in their own states. So contact us through the Gourmet Gone Wild website, and we'll be happy to get in touch with you and help.
Jordan,
Yes.
I'm interested.
Okay.
Yeah. We're
I
going
might
to be
come
doing
down
this
to
in Mississippi.
Yeah, I'll be coming down to Mississippi to help you out.
Okay.
It's also important to identify who are those audiences, and
Right.
it's sometimes tough when you say you're going to have an event and you want people to come to you. So we encourage people that are interested in trying Gourmet Gone Wild, how can you put together an event where you can go to them, where you can go to the audience that you're interested in reaching out to. I think some farmers markets is a really cool way to reach out to some audiences that may or may not be hunters, but they're interested in local food, they're interested in supporting local communities, and that might be a good audience to start with. I know in Georgia, I think they've done some similar programs at farmers markets.
What about Rotary Clubs and things like that? I'm trying to think of any event where people normally get together
Yes.
once a week or once a month. And maybe you can't do every aspect of this, but I bet if you offered to cook the meal for them that
Yes.
day, they would probably let you.
Yes, and another key is finding a chef or finding somebody who you can partner with to prepare. I mean, our chef is Serve Safe certified and has prepared in a safe kitchen and all of that. So making sure you have a way to access that is also important.
Okay. Johanna, is there any information online or a sample curriculum people could get their hands on if they wanted to start?
We do have a website as well. It's www.learntohuntmi.org. If you shoot me an email through the contact page, I would be happy to set folks up with examples of agendas, give some sage advice, help anyone out who's interested in starting a program. I have some lived-in experiences that I'd be happy to share.
The do's and don'ts.
Well, yes.
Well, thank you both very much. This was really, really good information. I'm happy for both of you. These are really good programs and you're doing a really good thing. And I'm sure our listeners are going to enjoy the content and not going to be surprised if both of these programs aren't replicated in other states. So thank you both again.
Thank you,
you.
Bronson. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time on Deer University. We're glad you joined us today and hope you learned something valuable about deer management. If you have questions about this podcast or a question about a topic we haven't discussed, please log on to msudeerlab.com, click on the Deer University tab, and send us your questions. We'll get to them as soon as possible. In closing, we want to thank our employers, the Mississippi State University Extension Service, and the Forest and Wildlife Research Center. We also want to thank the St. John and Dudley Hutchinson families for their endowments that support deer research and education.